Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever had that feeling, like you're driving with the parking brakes still on a bit, like there's just more potential inside you, maybe even a superpower you haven't quite tapped into?
Oh yeah, that's a really common feeling, I think. We often sense there's this deeper well of potential, but actually accessing it, that feels tricky.
Absolutely. And that exact idea, that's really the launching pad for the material you shared with us today. We're diving into these excerpts from Limitless by Jim Kwik.
It's a really fascinating look at, well, what holds us back, but maybe more importantly, what we can actually do to unlock more capacity, especially around learning and focus.
Exactly. So our mission really in this deep dive is to walk you through these pages. We want to pull out the core ideas for you. We'll look at, the modern stuff that trips us up, derails our focus.
Hmm.
The surprising truth maybe presented here about our potential, and then really get into the practical side.
Yeah.
Methods you can actually use to, upgrade your brain, upgrade your life.
Yeah, think of it as exploring your path towards becoming limitless. These sources are kind of the map.
It's about seeing yourself not as like fixed in your abilities,
Right.
but as someone who really has this incredible capacity for growth, for change.
Exactly. A shift in perspective.
Right. So let's set the stage a bit. The book's central promise, as it's put here, is pretty bold. Human potential.
Hmm.
Maybe the only truly infinite resource we have
Interesting way to frame it.
in our capacity to learn. Limitless. And the book really positions you, the listener, as the superhero in your own story, capable of, well, amazing things.
That reframing is really powerful, isn't it? Because it shifts things. It's not about external limits anymore. It's about your internal agency.
Yeah, you're not just, a victim of circumstance. You actually have the power to shape your own capabilities.
Hmm.
And the author's own story really drives this home. Jim Kwik talks about his journey starting with a brain injury way back in kindergarten. Learning was just a massive struggle for him.
Yeah, he felt like the broken one, I think is the phrase used.
All right. Took him 3 years longer than other kids just to learn to read. And he developed this real fear of public speaking because of it all.
It's quite an origin story, really. Born from such a deep challenge, he felt so fundamentally limited.
But he found inspiration, right? First in comic books, seeing heroes overcome impossible odds.
Mm-hmm.
And then, crucially, he found a mentor, someone with a library who kind of showed him, hey, maybe the problem isn't you. Maybe it's how you're trying to learn.
Right. And that struggle, that personal quest to fix his own learning issues, it became his whole mission in life, didn't it? Helping others get past their perceived limits.
It's amazing how that perceived weakness, that deficit, became the driving force behind developing these, advanced methods.
Well, he had to become an expert in how to learn because the usual ways just weren't cutting it for him. That often leads to much deeper insights, I think.
Which brings us right into the modern world.
Mhm.
A place the source argues is actually throwing up new hurdles, new supervillains, you could say.
Yeah, villains that are messing with our focus, our ability to learn well.
And the first one is probably, well, super obvious to everyone listening.
The digital deluge.
Information overload is just
Yeah.
constant,
Yeah.
nonstop. The sources mentioned that dying for information study,
Mm-hmm.
linking this flood to actual costs like tension, job dissatisfaction, even poor health. It's not just annoying, it's physically and mentally draining.
Yeah.
We often just don't have the strategies to handle it all.
Exactly. We're just swimming in data and our brains are desperate for some kind of filter, some structure.
Yeah?
And that leads right into the second villain.
Digital dementia. Oof.
Yeah.
This one lands. Just outsourcing our memory, right? To
Yeah.
our phones, Google, calendars.
We just don't have to remember things like we used to.
Not at all.
And the argument here is that our memory, it's like a muscle. It needs to be worked. But by constantly handing off that work to our devices, well, we're letting it get weak, letting it atrophy.
The book uses that great analogy, right? Phones are like electric bikes.
Exactly. They make the trip easy, maybe fun. But you're not actually building any strength. You're not getting mentally fit like you would by pedaling yourself.
And there's research mentioned too, linking actual mental exercise, brainer size, actively challenging your memory, learning new things, linking that to a lower risk of dementia down the road.
Yeah. So it's not just about forgetting like your friend's birthday. There could be real long-term consequences.
A pretty stark warning hidden inside all this convenience.
It really is. And the third villain.
Digital distraction.
Yes.
The pings, the notifications, the endless scrolling. I mean, our tech is literally designed by super smart people specifically to grab and hold our attention.
Mm-hmm.
The source points out that this is basically training us conditioning us to be distracted.
We get really good at switching context, jumping between emails and messages and websites, but we lose that ability to just stay focused, to concentrate deeply on one thing. So these three together, the deluge, the dementia, the distraction, they create a really tough environment if you're trying to learn or, perform at your best.
Okay, so how do we fight back then? How do we actually break free from these modern problems and unlock that potential the book keeps talking about?
Well, the source lays out this core framework. It's called M3.
M3, okay.
Mindset, motivation, and method.
Mindset, motivation, method. Got it.
It's a really powerful combination. It's saying, look, it's not just about having the right techniques, the method.
Right.
You also have to believe you can do it. That's mindset. And you need a really compelling reason why you're doing it.
Yeah.
That's motivation.
It's presented as the path sort of from being limited to being liberated.
Exactly.
Okay, let's start with mindset. This seems to be all about spotting and challenging those beliefs that hold us back. The source uses a great acronym, LIEs.
LIES. Limited ideas entertained.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Limited ideas entertained. I like that.
These are basically the stories we tell ourselves, right? About what we're capable of or what we're not capable of. The source also mentions iceberg beliefs.
Iceberg beliefs.
Yeah, those deep, often subconscious ideas way below the surface. But they cause all sorts of problems in our lives. They affect our habits, our goals, everything.
And these LIEs, they often show up at that nagging voice, right? The inner critic.
Dr. Janice Vilhauer's work is mentioned here, describing that negative voice inside that's always judging, always doubting, telling you you're not good enough.
It's the voice that just stops us in our tracks. The book uses that image, remember?
Ooh.
The superhero.
Oh, yeah.
Who has all the power, knows all the methods to save the day.
Yeah.
But their inner critic whispers, you'll mess up or you're not ready.
And so they hesitate. They don't act. Their own belief, their own LIE stop them more effectively than any external villain could have.
Wow. Okay, let's dig into a couple of specific LIEs the book tackles. LIE number 3. Mistakes are failures.
And the source really pushes back on this. It says, no, mistakes are just proof. Proof that you're actually trying something new.
Yeah, think about Einstein. The source mentions he made tons of mistakes in his calculation.
Right.
But we don't remember him for the errors, right? We remember his persistence, the breakthroughs he eventually made. And Helen Greider's story is similar. Dealing with dyslexia meant she had to find different ways to learn.
She had to compensate, figure things out, and that turned a perceived weakness into a real strength. She became a great problem solver.
So mistakes don't make you a failure. They're just things you make while you're learning. That's a key difference.
It really is. You are not your mistakes.
Then there's the really big one. LIE number 7. Genius is born.
Oh, yeah. The book argues strongly against this. The idea here is that genius is made. It's built through deep practice, focused effort.
Look at Bruce Lee, right? His
Yeah.
background. Facing huge challenges, street fighting. It wasn't like he just woke up brilliant.
Not at all. He was constantly adapting, evolving, breaking away from traditional martial arts forms.
The source mentions Daniel Coyle's book, The Talent Code, which basically says greatness isn't born, it's grown.
And that quote, genius leaves clues. There is always a method behind what looks like magic. That's key.
So what seems like magic, like innate talent, is often just the result of really specific, deliberate practice, strategy.
Yeah, exactly.
And this ties right into another big LIE, doesn't it? The one about intelligence being fixed. The source brings in Carol Dweck's work here.
Right. Fixed versus growth mindset.
Explain that a bit.
Okay, so a fixed mindset is believing your intelligence, your abilities, they're just set. You have a certain amount, and that's kind of it.
Okay.
A growth mindset, on the other hand, understands that abilities can be developed through hard work, dedication, learning.
The source suggests that really simple language shift. Instead of saying, oh, I'm just bad at math,
Yeah.
try saying, okay, math is something I'm not good at yet.
That one little word, yet. It changes everything. It opens the door to potential growth.
And this isn't just, wishful thinking. It's backed up by the science of neuroplasticity.
Right. The brain's incredible ability to literally rewire itself based on what we do, what we learn, our experiences.
The London taxi driver study is perfect here. Their brains actually changed. Their memory centers grew as they learned all those streets.
It shows the brain isn't static, it's malleable.
So to fight these LIEs, the approach sounds simple, but maybe not easy. Identify the belief. Really look at the facts. Do they actually support this limitation? Often they don't.
Right.
And then consciously create a new belief, one that's based on evidence, empowering you. It takes real effort to rewrite those internal scripts.
Absolutely. So moving from what we believe is possible to why we even want to learn in the first place, that brings us to the second M, motivation.
Finding your fuel, your drive.
Exactly. The book makes a distinction between passion and purpose here. Passion is more like that initial spark, right? Exploring things, seeing what lights you up, what brings you joy. Purpose is clearer. It's that solid reason for taking action that often grows out of exploring your passions.
So having really concrete, compelling reasons why you want to learn something is critical.
Totally. The examples given are very down to earth. Learning Spanish, not just cause, but to really connect with your father-in-law.
Right. Or getting good at history to help your kid.
Yeah.
Or learning research skills to finally launch that business idea. It connects the learning to real-life outcomes.
And the source suggests this interesting exercise using pain and pleasure.
How does that work?
Well, you clearly identify all the downsides, the costs of not learning this thing or just staying stuck where you are, feel that pain.
Okay.
Then you vividly imagine and really feel all the exciting benefits, the rewards of actually achieving that learning goal. Feel the pleasure.
You're using emotion to drive the action.
Exactly. Because decisions, especially ones that require sustained effort, are often driven more by how we feel than just pure logic. Connecting strong emotions to both the pain of staying put and the pleasure of moving forward, that can be a huge motivator.
And speaking of motivation, the book briefly mentions setting boundaries and JOMO.
Yeah, the joy of missing out.
Right, the joy of missing out. It's about prioritizing your learning, your purpose, over maybe every single social invite or distraction that comes along.
Saying no to something so you can say yes to your goal, which leads us perfectly into the third M method.
Okay, so if mindset is believing you can, and motivation is why you want to, method is the practical how.
The how-to. And the really critical point here is that schools often teach us what to learn.
Yeah, facts, figures.
But they rarely teach us how to learn effectively. So the book argues you have to take charge of that yourself. You need to learn how to learn meta-learning.
Meta-learning, okay. And the source gives us an acronym for this too. FASTER.
Yeah, faster. It's a framework for more effective learning.
Okay, break it down for us. F is for?
Forget.
Forget. Forget what?
Forget your limits, those LIEs we talked about. Forget the distractions around you. And interestingly, forget what you think you already know about the topic.
So approach it with a beginner's mind.
Exactly. Be open. A is for act.
Act. Makes sense. Learning isn't passive.
Not at all. It's active. It's creative. You got to take notes, do the exercises, ask questions, get involved, do something.
Okay. S is for?
State. Your state matters. Your physical and emotional state when you're learning.
How so?
Learning is state dependent. You learn better when you feel curious, engaged, focused, maybe even a little excited. And you can influence your state.
Like how?
Simple things. Change your posture. Sit up straight. Focus on your breathing. That 4-7-8 breathing method is mentioned. Consciously choose to feel curious.
Interesting. Okay, T is for?
Teach.
Teach it to someone else.
Yep. One of the absolute best ways to solidify something in your own mind is to teach it to another person. You learn it once when you take it in. And you learn it again, maybe even better, when you have to explain it clearly.
Right, that makes sense. E.
Enter it into your schedule, your calendar. Make learning a priority.
If it's not scheduled.
It probably won't happen, right? Life gets busy.
True. Okay, and finally, R is for?
Review. You've got to revisit the material regularly.
To fight the forgetting curve.
Exactly. We naturally forget stuff pretty quickly if we don't review it. Spaced repetition reviewing at increasing intervals is really key for long-term memory.
Okay, faster. Forget, act, state, teach, enter, review. That's a solid framework.
And within that method part, the source gets into some specific techniques. First up, focus and concentration.
Which is tough these days with that digital distraction villain lurking.
Definitely. But the book presents focus not as some innate talent, but as a muscle, something you can actually train.
How do you train it?
Well, things like calming your mind, deep breathing techniques again, and interestingly, tackling those tasks that are stressing you out.
Tackling them helps focus.
It relates to something called the Zeigarnik effect, that nagging feeling you get from unfinished tasks.
Yeah.
It actually takes up mental bandwidth, drains your focus.
Yeah.
So just starting a difficult task, even if it's just for 5 minutes, can ease that mental tension and actually free up your focus for other things.
Interesting. Okay, what about study techniques?
Active recall gets a lot of emphasis.
Active recall, what's that exactly?
It's huge. Instead of just passively rereading your notes or the textbook,
Which is what most of us do.
right. Instead, you read a section, then you close the book, and you actively try to retrieve the information, explain it out loud, write down what you remember without looking.
Forcing yourself to remember it.
Exactly. Studies show that this repeated retrieval practice, forcing your brain to pull out the information, is way more effective for long-term memory than just passively recognizing it.
Like the difference between a multiple choice test where you just recognize the answer
Uh-huh.
and an essay question where you have to generate it all yourself.
Precisely.
Hmm.
And related to that is effective note-taking.
What are the pitfalls there?
Well, common ones are trying to write down everything the speaker says, so you're not really listening,
Guilty.
or taking notes in a way that makes them basically useless when you look back at them later.
Okay, so what's the better way?
Clarify your purpose. Why are you taking these notes? Listen actively first. Use your own words as much as possible, and use abbreviations you'll actually remember. Make them work for you.
Got it. Okay, next big method area, memory.
Right. And again, the source is really clear. There's no such thing as just a good or bad memory. It's not innate. It's about whether your memory is trained or untrained. It's a skill you develop.
The Baker paradox illustrates this, right?
Yeah, classic example. You're much more likely to remember that a guy's job is being a baker than you are to remember if his last name is Baker. Why? Because the profession baker has tons of connections in your brain. Smells, bread, ovens, white hats. The name baker is just abstract.
Associations matter.
Hugely. And the book gives us another mnemonic for memory, MOM.
Oh,
Motivation, observation, method. You need a reason to remember motivation. You need to actually pay attention in the first place, observation.
Yeah.
And you need effective techniques, method.
and for those methods, visualization, emotion, and location are highlighted.
Yeah, our brains are wired for images, feelings, and places. Make information visual, connect emotion to it, link it to a location. It becomes much stickier, much more memorable.
The loci method, the memory palace, uses location, right?
Exactly. You mentally place items you want to remember along a familiar path, like walking through your house, and then you just walk the path again to recall them. It leverages our natural spatial memory.
And word substitution for abstract stuff.
Yeah, turning abstract concepts into concrete, maybe even silly images, makes them easier to grasp and remember.
Okay, moving on to reading. A lot of people feel they read too slowly or don't retain much.
Mm-hmm. Common obstacles mentioned are subvocalization, hearing the words in your head as you read.
Yeah, I do that.
Regression, your eyes jumping back to reread stuff. And just getting bored because you're reading too slowly.
Wait, reading too slowly causes problem.
That's the counterintuitive point the source makes. Reading faster, up to a certain point, can actually increase your focus and comprehension.
No?
Because if you read too slowly, your brain has too much spare capacity. It gets bored, it starts to wander. A slightly faster pace can keep your mind more engaged on the text.
Wow. The book mentions Sarah's story, tripling her reading speed.
Yeah, just by applying some straightforward techniques. And reading is framed as just foundational for all other learning. It stretches your mind. That Oliver Wendell Holmes quote is great.
Which one?
Every now and then, a man's mind is stretched by a new idea or sensation and never shrinks back to its former dimensions. Reading does that.
Love that. Okay, finally, under method, thinking tools.
Just touched on briefly, the 6 thinking hats model is mentioned.
Right, de Bono. Different colored hats for different ways of thinking.
Exactly. A structured way to look at a problem from multiple angles. Just the facts, white hat. Optimism, yellow. Potential problems, black. Emotions and intuition, red. Creativity, green. And managing the process, blue.
Useful for meetings or problem solving.
Yeah.
And VAK learning styles.
Visual, auditory, kinesthetic. The idea is knowing your preference. Do you learn best by seeing, hearing, or doing? Can help you tailor how you study or take in information, though most people use a mix.
Okay, so that covers mindset, motivation, method. But none of that works without fuel, right? Energy.
Absolutely. The source stresses that mental and physical vitality.
Yep.
That's the foundation. That's the fuel for motivation for applying the methods.
And number one on the energy list seems to be sleep.
Non-negotiable. It's presented not as a luxury, not even a choice, really. It's essential for brain function, memory consolidation, learning, everything.
And there's a link mentioned between exercise and sleep.
Yeah, regular exercise is shown to improve sleep quality, even for people who struggle with chronic sleep issues. Consistency seems to be the key.
And obviously the fuel we put in our bodies, food. The book lists some top 10 brain foods.
Mm-hmm. Things like avocados, blueberries, broccoli, dark chocolate. Good news there.
Nice.
Eggs, leafy greens like spinach or kale, fatty fish like salmon or sardines, turmeric, walnuts, and just plain old water. Hydration is crucial.
These provide key nutrients, supplements to mention too.
Briefly, things like phospholipid DHA from fish oil, B vitamins, curcumin from turmeric. The suggestion seems to be they might help maybe talk to a doctor, especially if your diet isn't quite hitting all the marks.
Okay. And other energy factors,
Oh,
like environment.
yeah, a clean, organized space can reduce mental clutter. Your peer group matters too. Who you spend time with influences you.
Hmm.
Meditation gets a mention for calming the mind and establishing a solid, productive morning routine.
What kind of things are in that routine?
Things like recalling your dreams maybe, hydrating right away, getting some oxygen with deep breathing, maybe some journaling to clear your head, and reading something inspiring or useful to engage your brain.
Okay, so pulling all this together, the M3, the energy, the methods, it comes down to building habits, right?
Exactly. Real change, lasting learning, it happens through those small, consistent daily choices and actions.
The stone cutter analogy is used, right?
Yeah, it's perfect. Each swing of the hammer on the stone seems to do nothing.
Right.
But eventually, after many consistent blows, the stone cracks. It's those small, simple steps day after day that build momentum and lead to breakthroughs.
And finally, the source brings in this really powerful idea, flow state.
Ah, yes. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's work.
Describe flow again. What is that state?
It's that feeling of being completely immersed in what you're doing. Total concentration, you lose track of time. The effort feels effortless almost. You're just fully engaged, focused, and it feels incredibly rewarding.
And the source claims getting into flow can make you way more productive.
Yeah, potentially up to 5 times more productive, according to some research mentioned. It's a state of peak performance and optimal experience.
Wow. Can you actually make yourself get into flow?
Well, you can create the conditions that make it more likely. 5 ways are suggested. First, eliminate distractions, turn off notifications, close tabs.
Okay.
Second, dedicate a solid block of time. 90 minutes seems to be a good starting point. Third, do something you actually enjoy or find meaningful.
Makes sense.
Fourth, have a really clear purpose or goal for that session. And fifth, make sure the challenge is just slightly beyond your current skill level. Not too easy, not overwhelmingly hard, just enough to stretch you.
The sweet spot.
Exactly.
Okay, so as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into these limitless excerpts, what's the main takeaway, would you say?
I think the biggest thing is challenging that whole idea of fixed limits. It might just be the biggest LE we tell ourselves. Our brains are adaptable. Neuroplasticity proves that.
Right.
And by deliberately working on our mindset, finding our deep motivation, and using effective methods, we really do have the power to unlock potential we probably didn't even realize we had.
It really supports that idea we talked about earlier. Genius isn't just born, it's built. It's cultivated through effort and the right strategies. So we want to leave you, the listener, with a few things to think about straight from this material, reflecting on everything we've covered, the digital villains, the M3 framework, all those methods and energy tips. What really stood out to you? What resonated the most?
And thinking about your own life, your own learning goals right now, what's your core reason? What's that deep motivation, that why behind wanting to learn something better or faster?
And maybe most practically, considering all the tools presented, faster, active recall, memory tricks, focus techniques, morning routine, what's just one small method, one technique from these sources that you could commit to trying out this week? Just one small step.
And maybe one final thought to chew on, a provocative idea from the source, that learn, earn, return formula. The idea that this journey isn't only about personal gain, it's about using your unlocked potential to contribute, to give back. So the question becomes, how could unlocking your potential not just change your own life, but also equip you to help build, as the book says, better, brighter brains in the people and the communities around you?